Okay. Okay. So welcome back to our Finding Yourself in the Psalms. And I hope everybody had a good week. And for my Muslim brothers and sisters, a Ramadan Mubarak. And I hope the fast is the first day of the fasting, first couple days of fasting can be the hardest, I know. So I hope that it goes easy on you, but meaningfully. And I hope that it brings you a lot of peace and a lot of wisdom, and that a lot of growth will take place. And thank you you know, for coming along. Um, okay, so we are in Psalm 11. We finished Psalm 10, and we're up to Psalm 11. And as is our usual custom, Harav Hagaon Nathan is going to well will give us a read, and then we'll head into the text.
Thank you. למנצח לדוד, אדוני חסיתי, איך תאמרו לנפשי, עודי, הרחם ציפור, כי הנה הרשעים ידרכון קשת, כוננו חיצם על יתר, לראות במופל, לישרי לב, כי השתות יהרסון צדיק, מה פעל, אדוני בהיכל קודשו, אדוני בשמיים כיסו, עיניו יחזו, אף אפיו יבחנו, בני אדם, אדוני צדיק יבחן, ורשע ואוהב חמאס, שנאה נפשו, ימטר על רשעים פחים, אש וגופרית, ורוח זלעפות, מנת כוסם, כי צדיק אדוני צדקות אהב, ישר יחזו פנימו.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay. So we'll start now. I will give you a little bit of a heads up as I look at the translation here. He did make what I think it's not an error exactly. It's a style. One of the problems with translation is that when when a translator feels like they don't know exactly what the text says, the temptation is to kind of look at commentaries to kind of see what other people have said. And that sometimes works well. But sometimes it works well, but sometimes it also can destroy the poetry because the nature of the poetry is to use ambiguous language, right? That's part of a poetic technique, is to use ambiguous language in order to allow the reader to be able to provide their own context, information, and so on, right? That that's part of the beauty of the poetry. So here, there are two times when he kind of falls into depending on the commentator. Very often, when they do that, they usually choose uh, the I guess the turn of the first millennium commentator Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki from France, um, as kind of he's sort of the go-to commentary, and so very often they'll depend on that, and that's what he's done here. So there are a couple places, and I'll point out where that's happened. Okay, so we start out Lamnatzech David, and as I said before, these are the first line typically includes uh, a musical instruction, um, and a kind of attribution. So Lam Natsig David, uh, the translation here is for the conductor by David. Again, I think we're not exactly sure what Lam Natseach means, because we're not exactly sure how these psalms were performed in the temple, but it clearly is some sort of instruction for the way that it was sung. Okay. Badonai Chasidi says, I take refuge in God. How can you say, how can they say to my soul? And here, uh, so our translator has supplied the word, says, why should my enemies say to me? And that's not actually what the text says. The text says, why should they say to me? Without saying it's my enemies. And think that that's because he's kind of letting you in on an ongoing conversation, right? It's not him complaining about his enemies. It's about him talking about a universal experience. It's not just his enemies who are saying this, right? It's everybody's enemies who are saying this. It's anybody who is saying this. And he says, I've taken refuge in God. And he uses this expression, this verb many, many, many times. I take refuge in God. He says, how can they say to me, Nudi harchem tzipor? It says, oh bird, Nudi harchem. Either move from your mountain or move to your mountain. It's actually interesting because the preposition is missing. So there's no preposition. So we don't know whether it's talking about to or from your mountain. But if it's from your mountain, if it's from your mountain, it's like run away. How can they push me away from my place of comfort? Right? Because if you imagine, right, a bird, right? Why would a bird fly up onto a mountain? Because it's a place where it feels safe, right? We've seen, you find a little ledge on the rock, or you find a little hole, and that's your safe place. So how is it possible that when I've taken refuge in God, that they can say to me, little bird, get out of your place, get out of your safe place. On the other hand, if you understand the other way, it's like they're saying, go to your mountain, get out of here, right? Get out of here. I remember when I was working with homeless people, I was sitting once with a woman who had been homeless for 45 years. She'd been homeless for 45 years. And I said to her, what's the single hardest thing about being homeless for 45 years? And I expected she was going to say, finding a place to sleep or finding food or whatever. And she said, it's being told to move all the time. She said, I walk miles and miles every day because people are telling me to move, to go away, right? So they come, they sit down on a bench, and the bench is in front of a business, and people think it's unsightly. So they walk out and they tell them to move. So then they go to someplace else, they sit on a stoop, and somebody tells them to move. So here, right? So here, you can imagine that he's imagining himself as a poor bird that can be chased from place to place. Kihine harashaim yidrechun keshet. It says, let's see, works. See how the wicked draw their bows. He says they put their arrows ready on the strings. They wrote to shoot unseen, but in the dark, right? So that in a way that nobody can see them, right? To shoot in the dark against the Yishrei Lev, against those who are upright of heart. And there's a sense of wonder in this, like in the previous psalm. He's wondering how this is possible. I took refuge in God, right? I took refuge in God. And yet I can see that they tell me, get out of here, right? Or they chase me out of my place, my places of comfort. They chase me out of my places of comfort. And here he says, by the way, wander from your mountain from Israel. And that's directly from Rashi. Rashi says mountain, it must be Israel, right? That he's been chased, right? So that's one example. He continues, Ki hashatot yiharesun. Says, now it says our foundations are destroyed, right? Our foundations are destroyed. Now here he says when the priests, that's also from Rashi, that's also from a commentary. Without what it says, it means when the foundations are cracked, okay, it's not just that the details of things are messed up, okay, it's that things are messed up, at the bottom floor, right? They're messed up from the bottom floor, right? And he says, and this is a interesting. He says, tzaddik ma fa'al. The tzaddik, it could mean what did they do, right? He says tzaddik ma fa'al. What did the tzaddik do? What did the righteous person do? I mean, how can they be blamed? How can it be possible that all this is happening when the righteous person has done the right thing, right? From the very beginning, it says "Ba'adonai chansiti," right? I took refuge in God, right? I did the right thing, right? How can this be happening? Adonai behechal kodsho. God is in His holy temple. Adonai b'shmayim kiso. Says God's throne is in the heavens. So one answer is how maybe it's that God is so transcendent, so far beyond the world that He doesn't see what's going on, right? That's a possibility. Maybe that's where it is. Maybe God is so far away, so distant, so beyond our reality that our reality just has nothing. So these things, so here there's good and there's bad and there's and good things happening to bad people and bad things happening to good people, and God doesn't notice, and because He's so beyond it all. But here he says, Einav yechezu ve'afapav yivchanu b'nei adam. He says his eyes see, right? And yechezu is yechezu is not just seeing. A chozeh is a person who is a seer, right? A person who sees in that spiritual way. So God sees, remember in the in the movie Avatar, right? When He says, I see you. Forget what's like it. I see you, right? That kind of seeing, the seeing where you really see something. So he says his eyes see. Yivchanu b'nei adam. He says, and yivchanu, right, means he looks into, he gazes into, he inspects, right? He inspects human beings. It could even mean, it's related to the word bechina, can also mean tested, right? He tests human beings. It's not just, so he sees human beings and he tests them. So we should understand that no, it's not that God is up in His heavens and he's on his throne and somehow He's distant. But yes, He sees us, right? He sees us and He also tests us. And then he continues. He says, Hashem tzaddik yivchan. He says, and who does He test? Test those people who are tzaddik, those people who are just, the people who are devoted to Him. Those are the people that He tests. Rasha ohev chamas, right? Sana nafsho. He says, and those, the wicked who love violence, he says, his soul hates them. Right? An interesting expression, that kind of an interesting anthropomorphism of God to give him a soul. Well, okay, so Linda asked the question, two questions. How can we maintain faith and trust amid trials and persecution? How can we reconcile the existence of evil and injustice in the world with God's goodness and sovereignty? So I think it's a big challenge. Okay, I don't want to minimize the challenge. I think the answer that he's offering here is that we have to see this as a test. Not to think that God has abandoned us. See, I think that the temptation is to think, okay, God has given me over to the forces, to the forces of the world, and they're just going to do with me whatever they want. And that's what's happening here. And I think what he's saying here is, no, God tests those people who are devoted to him. So you shouldn't expect, so the expectation shouldn't be, okay, I'm doing the right things, so I'm not going to be persecuted. I'm not going to suffer. I'm not going to, but on the contrary, right? On the contrary, the Talmud talks about Yisurim Sha'ava, the sufferings of love, right? Because if the student, often I was a teacher, I was often much tougher on the students that I favored and I thought had real talents, right? Those students, I admit that I was sometimes tougher on them. I gave them more difficult disciplines. I asked more of them. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I did, right? And I think that that's part of what's going on here. And I think we get a little bit of I think at the last line, I think we also get maybe the hint of an answer. So let's see if that happens. But I think that's it so far. So God tests the people devoted to him, hates the wicked and those who love violence. And by the way, this word Hamas is interesting. Here he's using it to mean violence. I guess it's important since it's become, it's a word that's in the news. Hamas means violence. It also means it can also mean stealing. It can also mean talking somebody out of their property. That's an interesting meaning I saw recently, that when we say in the there's a daily in the daily confession we say Hamasnu, and I saw an interpretation of it that it meant to talk somebody out of property, like to kind of swindle somebody. So I guess all of those things, none of them good. So, and he says, Yamter Arashaim Pachim Ish Gofrit. He's going to rain down on the wicked flaming coals of gofrit, of sulfur, Varuach Zilafot at Manat Kosa. He says, and a raging wind will be the fulfillment of their cup, will be their lot, will be what they get. Okay, so they're going to get this, and the raging, in the image of the raging wind is used many places in the prophets. This idea like of this, kind of a storm of confusion, and that's what's going to be their lot. Ki tzadik Adonai tzedakot. He says, for God, ki tzadik Hashem tzedakot. For God is. So there are different ways of understanding this line. It's a little bit difficult. probably right. It goes. There are different there are different ways. There are different ways of understanding this particular verse because the grammar is weird. Probably a better way of understanding it is kitzadik Adonai, kitzadik Adonai, because God is righteous. Tzedakot ohev, that he loves those things which are righteous, and then yashar yechezu penemoy. He says their faces will see, or they will discern yashar, what is straight, right? What is straight. So this is where I think maybe we have a little bit of an answer to Linda's question. So it says God is righteous, right? And he loves righteousness. Okay. And here it says he sets their sights on the straight path. So it's actually in the plural. So it doesn't seem like it seems like they are doing something, not him, right? So if they are seeing yashar, if they're seeing straightness, right? They're seeing straightness. So so that would seem to say that the person who is righteous, when they're looking at this situation, right, from our very beginning, where we take refuge in God and somehow it's still not working, right? They, right, whoever they are, right? They could be anybody, right? There's always a they. Wasn't there a movie where somebody was it a movie where somebody claimed that they were the they that everybody always talks about? I forget what it was. It was like a comedy where, you know, they had in heaven the people, or in hell the people who claimed to be the they that everybody always talked about. So they, whoever they are pushing us away, making us move either, from our comfort zone or into no man's land. And we worry that maybe and the basis of things is destroyed, and we say, what is it? It says tzaddik ma fa'al, right? It could be understood as like, what did the righteous person do? Like, how are they supposed to deal with this? Like, what are you supposed to think about this? And then you think, well, maybe it's, God is in his holy temple, God's in the throne of heavens, but he sees us, and he looks at us, and he tests us, and he tests the people who are devoted to him. And it's the wicked really who are pushed away, right? He says those are the ones that he hates. Those are the ones who are ultimately pushed away, and they're going to suffer. And I think that, and somebody asked, can you understand the raging wind as a raging spirit, right? They're the ones who are churned up inside, right? And churning themselves up inside. And says, finally, God, right? God is righteous, right? Because God is righteous, and he loves righteousness. And says, and who are the righteous? Right? Yashar Yechez Pnima, the people who set their sights, who set their faces to see what is yashar, what is straight, to understand that, like, instead of being what's not right, right? To see, oh, this all looks crooked and messy, to say, no, this all makes sense. Right? This all makes sense. This is really yashar. This is not something which is crooked. This is not something this is simple. God tests us. And even though, and not tests us, not in spite of the fact that we're righteous, but because we're righteous, and that's part of our relationship with him, is that God puts us into tests. I don't know if that answered the question. I hope I did. I hope it answered your question. hopefully. Okay. Okay. Breathe. Okay, and we'll start the 12th. The 12th. Well, first of all, let's pause. Thoughts on Psalm 11. What do you think? Do you relate to it?
Oh, I think you definitely have a good interpretation.
I did my
I was
best.
thinking about this a lot during the past 2 years with all the things that were going on in my life.
Yeah, I think that
Why the test? Oh, there must be some meaning with it. I think you have a good explanation there.
yeah, and I think one of the things that strikes me is that he asks why me a lot,
Mhm.
and I think that makes perfect sense because we all ask why me a lot. We may not admit it. I feel like some people, I feel like the more religious you get, the less likely you are to admit that you think that way, right? Because you're supposed to be so holy, and yes, everything is a test from God. But we ask that all the time, why me? I took refuge in God. I committed myself, right? What is happening to me? And I love that he says they. It's not, we don't even know who they are. Like, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Just, it's just random stuff happening to us, and I feel like this is I think this is uh, a pretty common human experience. Um, yeah, it's a pretty common human experience. Okay, and I don't know at all what this ish go free, this fire and coals and all that stuff. I have no idea. I have no idea where that image comes from. Yeah, sir.
I think it comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay,
Oh, right.
right. Yeah, and interestingly enough, I just watched a documentary on PBS. There is actually geological evidence that there was an extreme um, meteor shower that really would have burned up everything in that area. There's evidence of that melted glass rock and stuff like that. So there really was at that time some sort of incident, in where they think Sodom and Gomorrah were, that really impressed itself on people's mind in terms of imagery. But I think that's
Okay.
where it comes from. Fire and brimstone ran down.
Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. The brimstone. I didn't know. I don't. Why is sulfur called brimstone? Anybody know?
It's the name for it, but
Yeah.
sulfur is common in volcanic eruptions and things like that.
Right.
You get a lot of sulfur in that. Yeah, it
Okay.
smells too.
Yeah, it's in that. Right. It's right. It's stinky and
Yeah.
horrible. Okay. Let's start the next. We'll start the next one. We'll start the next one, and of course, the next one begins with an instruction, l'menatzeach. So it's for the it's for the menatzeach, the conductor or whoever that is, right? For the leader of the band, al sheminit. Okay, so it's on the 8-stringed sheminit. We most people agree that it refers to an 8-stringed harp of some kind, right? An 8-stringed instrument. Yes.
Lee?
Yeah.
Okay. Brimstone is the Old English for sulfur. It literally means burning stone.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Google.
Thank Dr. Google. Okay. If only we had the Oxford English Dictionary, we could find out the first time that was used. Okay. And then lastly, so it's on the Sheminit. This is to be performed on an 8-stringed lyre of some kind of stringed instrument, and it's Mizmor David. It's a psalm by David. Okay. Hoshia Adonai. Help us, God. Ki gamar chasid. For the pious are no more. This word chasid, which has become a gang designation, right? Chasidim, and has been used throughout Jewish history as a gang designation. So there was a gang. There was the Maccabees, who are famous, referred to themselves as the Hasidim, as the pious ones. Back in the year 1000 or so, there were a group of German pietists who called themselves the Hasidim, and then back in the end of the 17th century, people started to call themselves Hasidim again, the pious. But here, the kind of the definition that the Talmud gives of a person who is a Hasid is a person who is lifnim mishurat adin, a person who goes beyond the letter of the law, right? So the law kind of gives you a basic outline for moderation. A person who goes a little bit beyond that moderation is called a Hasid. He says, Ki gamar Hasid, the Hasid are all gone. Ki pasu emunim b'bnei adam. He says, and the emunim, the faithful, have disappeared from mankind. He's not going to give a very positive view of the world right now. He says, Shav yidabru ish et re'ehu. And people tell each other, here it could be, he translates it as lies, but there have to be lies. People tell each other useless things. People tell each other things which that's mean like something which is meaningless, right? Meaningless things. Sfat chalakot belev yidaberu. He says, and their lips are their lips. They say smooth halakot, smooth things, right? They're just saying things which are things which sound good, but are basically meaningless. They can be meant for flattery or for whatever else, but they're just smooth words. Okay, it says, and they speak heart to heart. It says balev valev is usually translated. They say not just deceit in their hearts, but they speak with two hearts. That's how most commentators say it, like that. They speak with two hearts, right? With one heart, with another heart. So they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth, right? They're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. They have two completely different intentions, and to one person they speak with this intention, and to another person they speak with this kind of intention, and it's all flattery. Yachret Adonai kol sitei chalakot, and says, may God destroy all the flattering lips, all those smooth talking lips. Lashon medaber gedolot, and those who speak with, and it says, and the tongue that speak with arrogance, or speak with speak of great things. Okay, so he says, Asher Amru, and again we have that we don't know who's speaking, right? Those people who say, right? He says, Asher Amru, L'shonenu, says Nagbir. He says we're going to become great and strong with our tongues, right? We're going to become great and strong with our tongue. Svatenu itanu mi adonanu. He says, with the way that we as long as our lips are with us, that's the best, that's kind of what it says. As long as our lips are with us, right? Mi adonanu. Who can be a lord over us? Who can lord over us? Who can control us? Right? We are so good with our words. We are so slick, right? We're so slick that nobody is going to control us, right? We're going to be I think Linda asked, by the way, why is faithful in the plural but pious in the singular? I don't know. It's a good question. Paseo Medin Mibnei Adam. Gemar Chassid. I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not sure. It's a good question. It's a great question. I don't know. I'll try to, I'm sure somebody else answers the question. Not sure you like the answer, but we'll look it up. Well, can the human heart be trusted according to the Psalm? This is not giving a very, this is not giving so far where we do not have a very positive view of human nature so far. Okay, this is right, but now he says, Mishodanin, the poor have been robbed, Miankot Evyonim, and the needy have cried, and Kat Evyonim, and the needy have cried out. It says, Ata akum v'yamar Hashem. God will say, now I will rise up. Right? We have this thing again and again. He uses this imagery of God rising up. He says to God, rise up, rise up. And this is like, this is, I guess, what we could use the word theophany, right? There's these moments when it seems like there's no God in the world, right? I mean, these people are running wild, right? All the tyrants are saying we can do whatever we want. We have no problem, right? Says we have no problem. We can do whatever we want. Says we've got the right words as long as we say the right thing, right? We know how to use propaganda, right? We know how to do all that stuff. Everything is going to be fine, right? Everything is going to be fine. And then all of a sudden, though, God, right, gets up, right? And he makes himself known, right? He makes himself known, right? Asid Yesha Yafiach Lo, he says, I'm going to deliver them. So what turns things around is suffering, right? Is the cry of those people, of the cry of the oppressed, right? The cry of the people who have been robbed, the cry of the needy, right? Awakens a theophany, right? It awakens God becoming more present in the world and saying, I'm going to deliver them. Okay, so we'll end there because we end on something good. It's very important to end on something good. And it's also important to end after 45 minutes so that people aren't too bored. And yeah, I think Annika did answer the question in the chat. It is comforting to know that we get tested and we get rewarded for patience. That and that this, what we experience, is also, it's not that God's not paying attention. It's not that the evils of the world would go unanswered, but that there's enough, for better or for worse, there's enough room for all sorts of tough things to happen, right? There's a lot of room for tough things to happen, but eventually God makes himself known, comes out of hiding, so to speak, right? And says, I will deliver them, and so eventually he looks and he sees our cries and says, I'm gonna deliver you from all this. So whether it's as individuals, or it's as communities, or it's as countries, or as it's nations, I hope that we all experience deliverance, and that those people who now cry will soon be heard.
Amen.
So, other thoughts so far? Well,
Yeah, I think that this idea about talking is that, in other words, if the wicked are saying, we're going to couch things in certain language, right? And in a way that's going to mask the underlying evil or injustice of it.
Yes.
And then the people who are suffering say, oh, what do you mean pro-life when you allow children to starve to death?
Right.
Right. So that puts the lie to this smooth language that
Right.
they think, oh, as long as we use these euphemisms.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great translation of that word. The halakot, the smooth things. Sfat halakot could be like euphemisms. You know, that they speak. I actually like that. That's actually a nice way of putting it, right? Imagine, and that's also the two hearts, because the whole thing about euphemisms, you're saying one thing and really meaning another, right? And I think that's the sense here, but that's going to be exposed, right? That's going to be exposed. The cry of the people who suffer from it is going to expose it, and then God deals with it. I like the comment says, verse 7, that it talks about yes, the silver being refined 7 times. Yeah, it's the 7-fold refining of the silver. Which I don't know anything about silver refining, but I imagine that must be a lot of refining silver. That must be very fine silver indeed. Okay, we'll deal with that verse next week. And if any more comments, thoughts? Okay, anybody has comments, please contact me. You know how to find me. We also have the chat, so feel free to put it up in the chat so that other people can share in it. And if you have anything you want to share, art, poems, anything, interpretive dance, I highly recommend interpretive dance.
I have a question.
Okay.
I noticed that the group page has been very quiet since the end of January. I went last night because I was looking for the links to the various classes that you've given in this course, and they stop it on January the 29th. Do you think you could put the links there?
Oh, you want them on, you want to about the Facebook group?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are they in your WhatsApp group?
I've
I'm
been
not
putting
in the
them-
WhatsApp
yeah,
group.
they're in the WhatsApp group. Yeah, do you have
Could you
WhatsApp?
put them? No.
Okay, so I'll put them on the Facebook group too. Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'll do that. No problem with that. Absolutely willing to do that. I should remember.
Thank you.
Okay. So everybody have a beautiful week. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. And I heard that
Hello, everybody.
snicker. I don't know who snickered, but I heard you. Okay. Bye.